Yo, what is good, everybody? I want to be completely real with you. My Hero Academia Season 8 has been fantastic so far. In the last video, I said I was going to wait until the full season came out. In the last video, I claimed that, well, a couple videos actually, I've claimed how I've inspired My Hero Academia. You know, I hate the direction that the art style has gone in terms of the anime. I hate how the anime seemingly didn't have any, the anime was very lackluster in terms of the animation and quality of the show. I've expressed the fact that I really didn't like the ending, but My Hero Academia Season 8 though seems to be filled with that passion that I've been waiting for. Seems to have the quality backing it. Seems to have passion that I think that the show deserves. So far, we've seen a fight between All Might and All For One, right? That's how the last season ended, and I thought it looked horrible. And I think we can agree that it did look horrible. But coming back though, it actually looked a lot better. It was still kind of, you know, slideshowy at times, and you can definitely see where they use CGI for All Might, but that's fine. Overall though, you know, All Might did a really good job against All For One in terms of the animation. You can really see that the studio, I think they switched back to the original studio. Now it's all been Studio Bones, but from what I think I remember is that Studio Bones is also set up as in like there's different like branches. So whether we're getting like the A, B, or C team for some of the previous seasons, you know, I feel like we're on like the A team or maybe even the B team for this particular season. So All Might, you know, he's fighting All For One. You know, there's a lot more drawing rather than CGI use. You know, you can definitely tell that they took their time. You know, it just looked awesome. You know, everything just looked amazing. All For One looked amazing. All Might looked great, especially when he was laughing and cackling. It was fantastic, man. It really was. Like, I'm sitting there at my desk, you know, watching the show. You know, I was amazed. Now, is it as good as it could be? Absolutely not. You know, from season 1, 2, and 3, it definitely isn't up there for that kind of quality, but season 4 is where you definitely start to see the shift and change in terms of how they animate fights. You know, they don't really expand. That's really my major issue with My Hero Academia, is that the studios really don't take any creative freedom as far as, like, they follow the manga to a T. And Horikoshi is the kind of writer where he over-explains everything. You know, the characters' thoughts have their own inner thoughts, and his explanations have narrations, and we see that especially when it came time when Bakugo came back, and all that coolness is interrupted with tiresome explanation and backstory. You know, it's like, can we just get Bakugo flying in and being cool before, you know, we just start talking and yapping? And that's really what My Hero Academia really like has devolved into. It's just a whole lot of yappity yap and just yapping. It's like they stop animating stuff because they got to get so much narration. It's like, why not just have all the animation flow while stuff is being animated? You know what I'm saying? I just don't get it, man. But you know, that's just the way Horikoshi chooses to write, and I take a lot of inspiration with that. Just not as much, you know what I'm saying? My Hero Academia is honestly probably one of my biggest inspirations for how I write my story. If you guys don't know, I write a story called Dive of the Horizon. As always, you can find it in the description down below on medibang.com. It's great. I just released chapter 9. You can definitely see all the inspiration I take from My Hero Academia in terms of how I explain things. I told you guys in the previous video as well that I straight up just, you know, steal panels sometimes, and My Hero Academia has been my biggest inspiration in terms of how my story looks, as far as like how I use screen tones and the hatching and so on and so forth. You know, My Hero's been a very big part of my comic journey. You know, I came out and said, you know, how much I hate My Hero Academia. I did a video on a manga that I do not recommend because I was frustrated with My Hero Academia, but I told you guys though, like, I really do love My Hero Academia. It's just that I wish that the author did things differently, right? You know, my problems with Deku as a character has not been solved. You know, toward the end of the story, there was a lot of plot holes, and you know, I really did not like how the story ended because we got the narrative switch from how I became the #1 hero to how we became the #1 heroes, and I just don't think that was a good change. Tell me why the opening basically spoils the entire season. Like, why did they do that? You know, but I'm not gonna rant though, because there's a lot of flaws that we can point out. There's a lot of flaws that we can't point out, but I'm not gonna do that though. Right now, I'm enjoying the show. I'm excited to see the fight between Deku and Shigaraki. I did notice in the most recent episode with Bakugo that they did switch some of the visuals for the opening, which is interesting. Next episode, we're getting Bakugo versus All For One for sure. That was a pretty exciting point in the manga because I was reading it week by week when it was coming out, and we didn't see Deku at the time for like 30 chapters. And that's the same thing that happened in season 4, which I think was the reason why season 4 really took a dive, because it was a long arc and Midoriya did not show up for pretty much half the season. That's only for those who were watching it week by week. My Hero Academia season 4, that's when I started reading the manga because I had to, because the weeks were taking too long and I really wanted to see what would happen next. And when we finally got that end fight between Overhaul and Deku, it was, I mean, it's still horrible. You know what I mean? Like, it starts off kind of nice, and then it just was not a good fight overall. But like I said though, I'm enjoying season 8. I have high hopes for the Deku and Shigaraki fight. Deku goes to punch that mountain. What will that look like when we finally see overlay on screen, which we've seen in the opening? How will that fight look? You know, because it's not a very long fight, and it is a very informative fight. You know, Horikoshi doesn't really draw fight scenes. He writes explanations. And I feel like too, not to go off topic, but the animators, man, like, they really could have expanded on, you know, the way Horikoshi explains things and just showed showed it. And while they're showing it, they can have the narration in the background. But no, they just, everything becomes slideshows when they get to explaining and yapping. It's like with that scene when Deku finally showed up to fight Shigaraki in the previous season. It was literally like they just took the manga pages and just colored over them versus actually animating, right? When Deku did the quintuple smash or did the gear shift, that should have been epic and legendary. That was absolutely nothing, man. It was so trash and I was so upset. I'm like, this is all I've been waiting for. It gave me Invincible vibes. It really did. And overall though, I'm excited for season 8. Let's see where it goes. Make sure you guys go check out my story on Medibang.com. It is called Night of the Horizon. As always, you can find it in the description down below. I will see you guys in the next one. Peace out.